Hey everyone, welcome back to the Vintage Hen and Chick, and welcome if you're new. I'm Shelly, the owner and creator, and today I have some really fun fall-inspired projects for you, all using decoupage paper. They are super simple, super easy, and very beginner friendly. So if that's something that you're interested in, stick around. For project one, I'm going to apply some rice paper to the bottom of this enamelware pot. And I find enamelware pots all the time at flea markets and estate sales. And so I always pick them up. And so I'm just taking my enamelware pot, I'm laying it on my piece of rice paper. This rice paper is called Autumn Sunflowers. And I'm just going to trace the bottom of the pot. So that way I get a good size of what I'm going to be putting on the bottom. Once I get that traced, I'm going to cut it out, and then I'm going to use what's called the water method to go around the outside of my piece of rice paper because I want my edges to be a little bit more organic and not so straight like what the scissors does. And so I'm just going to take a paintbrush, dip it in some water, and go around the outside of my piece of rice paper and then tear off the edges of the rice paper. And this is going to give me a nice organic kind of old and grubby look to my rice paper. Once I have that done, then I'm going to apply the rice paper to the bottom of my enamelware pot. Now I'm going to apply my rice paper to the bottom of my pot, and I'm going to use my Dixie Belle Clear Coat Satin Finish. And this is super easy. It's a small area, so it's not hard to do at all. I am going to take my mister bottle and mist the back of my rice paper. And what this does is it helps the rice paper release the fibers and stretch a little bit more. It also helps so that way you don't get a lot of wrinkles when you're applying your rice paper. And so I'm just going to put an even coat of my clear coat on the bottom of my pot, lay my piece of rice paper down, smooth it out with my hands, and then I'm just going to go over it with my brush, smoothing everything out, making sure all the edges are adhered to the pot. And then that was super simple. This part is done. So my pot is completely dry, and now it's time to get grunged up a little bit. And I'm going to be using a combination of Sweet Pickins Black Beeswax and Dixie Belle Dixie Dirt in the color Earth. And so I'm just going to start out with the beeswax. I'm going to take a brush and go around the outside edges of the rice paper and then on the whole piece of rice paper itself with the black beeswax. And then I'm going to take a paper towel and buff everything in, even everything out, make sure it's nice and blended. Then I'm gonna take my Dixie Dirt, and I'm gonna take a small paintbrush, dip it in my Dixie Dirt, and apply it where I had previously applied the beeswax. Now the Dixie Dirt works really well with any kind of wax product. What that tacky wax does is it helps that Dixie Dirt really adhere to the surface. And so I'm just going around the outer edges again of my rice paper with the Dixie Dirt, and then I'm going to take a paper towel and buff it all in, blend it all in, kind of giving it that grungy, dirty, old look. And then once I have that buffed in and blended in the way I want, then this project is complete. Project number 2 is this cutting board that I got at a garage sale for a couple of dollars. And I'm going to be using that same Autumn Sunflowers rice paper. And what I did is I laid my cutting board on top of my rice paper and traced it out. So that way I would get the exact size that I need for my cutting board. And so now I'm just going to decoupage the rice paper onto my board. I'm going to use my Dixie Belle Clear Coat Satin Finish for that. It's my favorite decoupage medium. And I'm also going to mist the back of my rice paper with my mister bottle. That helps those fibers of that rice paper kind of loosen up, and it also helps prevent wrinkles and bubbles in your rice paper. And so I'm just going to apply an even coat of my satin top coat over the cutting board. I'm going to start at one end and then lay my rice paper down, get it positioned exactly where I want. What I like about this rice paper is it is a little bit more durable. It's not so delicate. And so you can easily move it around and not have to worry too much about tearing it. And so I'm just getting my rice paper where I want. I'm going to smooth it down with my hand, and then I'm going to go over it with my brush and that excess clear coat. And I'm going to go all the way down the entire cutting board, working section by section, putting the clear coat on the board, laying my rice paper down, smoothing it out, and going over the top of it with my brush. And once I get to the end of the cutting board, you'll see that my rice paper was a little bit short to finish the complete top of the cutting board, but that's no problem. I just took a piece of scrap rice paper from the same pattern. I kind of matched up the pattern a little bit, cut that out, and then I'm just going to lay it down right at the tip there. You're not even going to know that I patched two pieces together. So once I get that done, we're going to let it completely dry, and then we'll move on to the next step.
Guys my age laugh at my jokes, treat me like one of the bros. Think I'm cool, but they would never date me. 'Cause girls my age have tiny waists, skin tight denim, baby faces, dance at the bar like no one's watching. And I'm just a flower on the wall, not someone.
I let my cutting board dry completely, and now I'm going to just take my finger sander with some 220 grit sandpaper, and I'm going to go around the outside edge of the cutting board, cleaning up any excess rice paper that is on my board. Now, because I traced my board out over my rice paper, there's not a lot to do here. So I'm just going around, cleaning up the edges, making sure everything is nice and even and looks good. And then I'm going to also take a little tool and poke the hole out on the top of the cutting board where I decoupaged over. And then it's time to seal everything up again. When I do a project with decoupage, I like to make sure that everything is sealed up, especially when I have to go around it with some sandpaper, cleaning up those edges. And so I'm just going to be taking my Dixie Belle Clear Coat Satin Finish and giving one extra nice layer of the top coat over the entire cutting board and making sure all edges are sealed in and everything looks great. And then once that's dry, then this project is complete. My next project is a 2-for-1. I got a bunch of these blanks at a garage sale for $2. And so I'm going to do 2 projects on 2 of these boards. And I'm going to start out by using my Sweet Pickins beeswax bar. And I'm just going to go around the edge of this board with the beeswax bar because I want to distress it after I have it painted. And this wood is really dry, and if I didn't use the beeswax bar, I would probably have to sand it quite heavily to get any kind of distressing to show through. But because I'm using the beeswax bar, that's going to create a resist between the wood and my paint. And I'm going to start out by painting this board with Dixie Belle's French linen chalk paint, and I'm just going to give the entire thing 2 good coats of paint, getting everything covered up nicely, the top and the edges. And then once that's dry, then we'll move on to the next step.
Guys my age laugh at my jokes, treat me like one of the bros. Think I'm cool, but they would never date me. 'Cause girls my age have tiny waists, skin tight denim, baby faces, dance at the bar like no one's watching.
So my paint has completely dried, and now I'm just going to take my finger sander and I'm going to distress around the edges of my board. And because I used that beeswax bar, you can see that the paint is just kind of rolling off. And then once I get those edges distressed the way I want, then I'm going to be decoupaging some rice paper on my board. I'm actually going to be using both of these images of this rice paper, and they come together on a sheet called Autumn Mixed Media. And this rice paper is available on my website at thevintagehenandchick.com. So we're going to start out with this image first, and I'm just going to take my paintbrush, dip it in some water, go around the outside edge of my rice paper and tear off what I don't need for this image. I want to get that organic kind of rustic look to the rice paper. I don't want straight edges that a scissors would make. So this method with the paintbrush and dipping it in water works nicely. And once I get it to the size that I need for my board, then we're going to decoupage it on.
I'm just a flower on the wall, not someone you'd ever fall for. But in a couple weeks, you look at me, and I get pretty.
It's time to decoupage my rice paper onto my board. I'm going to use my Dixie Belle Clear Coat Satin Finish, and I'm going to also mist the back of my rice paper with my mister bottle. Now this couldn't be any easier. I'm just going to put an even layer of my clear coat over the entire board, and then I'm going to take my piece of rice paper and position where I want it on the board. And then I'm going to use my fingertips to smooth it out, go over everything with my brush, make sure everything is smoothed out and there's no bubbles in my rice paper. And then it's also going to seal in the top of my board. And then once that's done, I'm going to let it dry, and then we're going to complete this project.
When you want me, I'll be picture perfect. To make you happy, I'll be dancing, center of attention.
I'm going to do the exact same process with this board that I did with the other board. I'm going to go around the outside edges with my Sweet Pickins beeswax bar. However, I am going to paint this in a different color, and I'm going to be using my Dixie Belle's Colonel Mustard on this board. And so I'm going to do 2 even coats of paint, let it dry completely. We're going to distress the edges and then apply the rice paper. So I'm just going to play some music, and you can sit back and relax and watch the process.
Guys my age laugh at my jokes, treat me like one of the bros. Think I'm cool, but they would never date me. 'Cause girls my age have tiny waists, skin tight denim, baby faces, dance at the bar like no one's watching. But I'm just a flower on the wall, not someone you'd ever fall for. But in a couple weeks, you look at me, when I get pretty, then you want me, I'll be picture perfect. vision of the woman that you wanted me to be when I get pretty. Maybe once I'm beautiful, I feel like I'm good enough. My insecurities wouldn't get the best of me. Baby, I'm out of this world. Doable, your cover girl. Wouldn't have to work 'cause I get things for free. But I'm just a flower on the wall, not someone you'd ever fall for. But in a couple weeks, you look at me and I get pretty. Then you'll want me. I'll be picture perfect and make you happy. I'll be dancing, center of attention. Vision of the woman that you wanted me to be.
It's time for the final step in this 2-for-1 project. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to be using a combination of the Sweet Pickins Black Beeswax and the Dixie Belle Dixie Dirt in the earth color. And I'm going to grunge these boards up a little bit. I want them to look old and vintage and kind of moody. And so I'm going to start out with the wax. I'm going to go around the outer edges of my board and my image, take a paper towel, rub off the excess wax, buff that all in, and then I'm going to follow that up using my Dixie Dirt. And I'm going to just dip my paintbrush in my Dixie Dirt. Now with the Dixie Dirt, a little goes a long way. It is a powder form. And then I'm going to go around the outside edges of the board and the paper, and then I'm going to use a paper towel to buff everything in and blend everything out until I get the look that I'm going for. And I'm going to do the same process for each board, grunging it up, making it look old, making it look a little moody.
I get pretty. Guys my age laugh at my jokes, treat me like one of the bros. Think I'm cool, but they would never date me. 'Cause girls my age have tiny waists, skin tight denim, baby faces, dance at the bar like no one's watching. But I'm just a flower on the wall, not someone you'd ever fall for. But in a couple weeks, you look at me when I get pretty. Then you'll want me. I'll be picture perfect to make you happy. I'll be dancing, center of attention. The vision of the woman that you wanted me to be when I get pretty. Maybe once I'm beautiful, I feel like I'm good enough. My insecurities wouldn't get the best of me. Baby, I'm out of this world. Doable, your cover girl. Wouldn't have to work 'cause I get things for free.
I'm just finishing up the final board in this 2-for-1 project, and then this project is complete.
You look at me and I get pretty. Then you'll want me. I'll be picture perfect and make you happy. I'll be dancing, center of attention. Vision of the woman that you wanted me to be when I get pretty. When I get pretty.
Thank you so much for watching today's video. And if you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up, drop a comment, and hit subscribe. It's free and really helps my channel grow, and that way I can share more DIY and thrift flip ideas with you. I'll be back next week with another video. I'll see you then.